Hi, good morning. I'll try not to keep people too long. Lunch next. So I'm a freelancer network consultant who mainly does mergers, acquisitions, and divestments. But I think due to Brexit at the moment, not many companies are reaching out for merging or anything. So over the last year, I've been dragged into a number of failed or problematic 365 migrations. Most of them having large performance issues, either during the deployment or after the deployment, of users complaining about things not working the way they expected it to. And it's always nice, fast and whizzy at home, but when they're trying it in the office, it's always slow or things don't work. So I thought I'd put a presentation together to go over my learning from it, and hopefully people will pick up how not to do it. So the general rules of how large companies used to operate, and I'm sure a lot of people's experiences, is at one time the proxy server was king. It always sat in your network, never a gateway directly to the internet. Proxy server usually located in the data center, backhaul all the traffic across your WAN out through a single point in the data center. Everyone was happy, security was happy, all was well. Then came the cloud. Caused lots of problems, lots more traffic. The WANs couldn't handle it. Starting to get very expensive. A lot of services from Microsoft utilizes DNS load balancing, so based on where your DNS request comes from or your egress IP address, as to which data center to redirect you. Heavy use of Akamai CDNs and various things like that. Data center firewalls starting to struggle. More and more data is getting pushed through them. Some companies still try to use proxy servers, again, struggling with the number of connections and the caching and all of this, that sort of stuff. So a lot of companies, as a workaround, try to implement quality of service or offload their internet traffic, like a very crude form of SD-WAN, send it across the backup VPN links and that sort of stuff, just to bide them some time. And this was before they did 365. So 3 clients I had recently were utilizing very much this technology. And that was before they'd deployed any 365 technologies. So, kind thanks to Microsoft for doing the hard work and generating the diagrams for me. So you can generally see in this diagram where all the traffic is backhauled back to the data center. That's how it used to happen, and everybody was happy with that. Keeps security happy. Everything goes through the central IPS, IDS. They've got all the logging. Everyone's happy. Then comes Office 365, which is not proxy friendly. It's surprising the number of companies, quite large companies, who have deployed Office 365 and not read the basic 101 documentation from Microsoft. First line of the documentation, do not use proxy servers. So they use a proxy server. Or they think, oh, well, we're not using a proxy, we're sending it to this thing in the cloud. It happens to be a proxy server in the cloud. So it still has the same problems. Office 365 merges applications and web browsers. So they'll do their performance tests, and everyone's like, Microsoft Outlook's working fine, but SharePoint's really slow. They're all actually slow. It's just the application hides the performance issues from the end user because it's all cached. So they're all like, yeah, Outlook's working great, but SharePoint performance is horrendous. It's all slow. It's the network's slowing it all down, but they're just not seeing it with the application. Global DNS load balancing is heavily used by Microsoft, but a lot of companies still send all their DNS requests through a central set of DNS servers somewhere. So one of the client's central DNS servers were in Europe. Okay for the users in Europe, but anybody in America or APAC got a DNS request that came to Europe. So their traffic then went all the way over to Europe to get that small GIF file from the Akamai CDN, because as far as Akamai was concerned, you're based in Europe. Microsoft publishes a large list of IP addresses and URLs they use. So your security team comes along and says, well, can't we just script take on that set of URLs and IP addresses and put them in the firewall? Yeah, it works fine, but they only provide the list of IP addresses for services provided by Microsoft. They don't provide all the CDNs and all the third parties they plug into. So when the security team comes along, drops that in place, bang, 365 stopped working. Or it works, but the performance is worse than it used to be because it's struggling to connect to all of the Akamai CDNs, etc. Office 365 also uses TCP window scaling. Proxy servers don't support it. A lot of firewalls, unless you explicitly turn it on, doesn't support it. Lots of routers, unless you explicitly turn it on, doesn't support it. So again, it's mentioned in their 101 documentation, just people don't bother to read it. The TCP timeouts previously recommended was to have them about 100 to 300 seconds for them. You need to make them bigger because Outlook and various things like that use a very persistent connection. And if you keep tearing it down on the firewall, you're going to end up using more and more resources. Again, mentioned all in their documentation. And the other one is, which I found for a number of companies, is the CRIL, the Certificate Revocation List. That is updated on all Windows machines via the system account. If you don't allow the system account to get through your network to retrieve the CRIL, Office 365 and everything, miraculously one day will just stop working. Again, seen it quite often with companies where they don't allow the machines to actually download the CRIL, or they do so much heavy content filtering that they forgot to include it in the allow list for the end users that you're not going to give internet access to. You know, you have users, you're going to give them email, so you open up Outlook.com for them, but you don't allow them to get to anything else. They then can't update the CRIL, Office 365 stops working for them. So basically what you need to start looking to do is, the big thing is, don't send it to the data center and start looking at local egress. Again, thanks to Microsoft, a more complicated looking diagram, but basically what they're saying is, let them out your network as close as you possibly can to the internet. Your security team are more than likely going to have a lot of sleepless nights over it, but they just need to get used to it. It's the way of the world. More and more stuff is going to the internet. Stop trying to control your entire network from your perimeter. Start looking at controlling endpoints. Because this whole thing of everything goes through the proxy server, or I'm only going to allow this IP address to go to this IP address through the firewall, just isn't going to cut it as the world of the internet and the cloud moves on. So the plan here is local internet breakout. Do local DNS breakout. Something like Cisco's Umbrella Branch, for example, is a fantastic tool for doing that. Use enterprise-grade internet links when you're doing local internet breakout. The number of customers I've went to who's using a domestic DSL line and they're wondering why performance is very poor. Again, invest in a proper high-grade, high-quality internet link. You're going to need to use a default gateway. Again, a number of customers I've been to don't have a default gateway in their network. So they actually try injecting static routes for everything for 365. It's just unmanageable. Just accept it. Put the default gateway in. Let the traffic follow the flow it needs to follow. Make sure whatever edge device you're using going to the internet supports a high level of NAT sessions, because 365 is very, very NAT hungry. It opens up lots and lots of connections. Make sure the device can handle it. Don't try and do ACLs. You're just not going to get there. Trying to restrict what they go to, you're going to be constantly updating them. Some of the challenges we came across, as I mentioned, is security team seriously not happy about it. Takes a long time to make them, well, you're never going to make them feel warm and fuzzy about it. It's going to be a constant fight. Again, NAT connections, you might have to look to use NAT pools on whatever device is using if you've got a lot of connections going through them. And start thinking about protecting the endpoints. Trying to just constantly protect the outside of your network as you start going more cloud, it's not going to happen. Again, more and more devices are also starting to leave the networks, iPads, etc. You need to start looking to protect the device and not just the perimeter of your network. So NAT. Again, these are some of the stats I've stolen from the Microsoft website to give you an idea of how many NAT sessions an Office 365 client can start eating up. Again, going off the port ranges you've got and various things like that, your numbers start disappearing pretty quickly. If you've got a large organization that used to all go through one IP address, it's all fine. But as soon as you put 365 in there, and them stats have now just changed, so Microsoft's just done an update of them because of Microsoft Teams and all the voice and video that now starting to do it, them numbers have dropped even more because your session's going to use more and more ports. So again, be very aware of it. Look to use, whoever you get your internet connection from, ask for a block of IP addresses, set up a NAT pool, make sure you've got plenty of headroom in that space. And how not to do it, as I mentioned, a lot of companies don't do a correct assessment. They will roll out 1 or 2 test users and say, yeah, it's working fine, let's go. 6,000 users later, they're starting to have major issues. They've not done their assessments, they've not read the documentation. And again, Microsoft changes the documentation. So as they start releasing more and more products, again, review the documentation because the network requirements change quite considerably. What have I got there? Sorry, I haven't turned the screen off here so I can't see it. Some parts of it needs to talk to the Windows system layer. Again, a lot of people have been caught out by it, that they will give a user internet access but not give the system layer internet access. The system layer needs internet access for some parts of 365 as well. So again, makes people feel nervous allowing a system going out technically unauthenticated. It's the way Microsoft's written it, unfortunately. Windows network awareness can also be a problem. Microsoft does a very intelligent thing of querying a DNS record to see if it's got internet access or not. I ran into a company that took the smart response and actually blocked that, and all of a sudden all the machines said no internet available. So Office 365 didn't even attempt to connect to the cloud, all because they blocked one DNS record. Because they saw so many hits on it, they thought it was something dangerous, so they blocked it. If you're deploying Microsoft Teams, be incredibly careful with the voice and video. A client's just deployed it, they've taken it back out. They've got so many issues with it, and I don't think it's necessarily the Microsoft product. Just their network is just not up to coping with that amount of traffic going across it. And if you're doing anything with WAS and SD-WAN and stuff, be very, very careful about it. Cisco WAS and Microsoft Teams are seriously not best friends at the moment. There's a lot of work to be done in that area. And then just something going about some of the interesting workarounds. I'm aware I'm running very close to time. Proxy bypass, Microsoft produces a nice pack file. If you need to use a proxy server, look at their pack file. It produces a nice big bypass list for you, does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. Look at something like Cisco Umbrella or something for your DNS. Again, it solves a lot of your DNS problems because you can't send it all through a single set of DNS servers. Default route in your network, absolutely critical. Don't try and manage it by static routes. Permit 443 and 80 pretty much to anything on the internet. There's no way of other controlling it. If anybody has any ideas, I'm very welcome to hear them because so many clients I'm dealing with bumping into this exact same problem. One of the things you can do to trick some of the DNS, and it's not very nice, is use a stub zone inside of Microsoft. Windows DNS, if you don't want to allow DNS out, you can do some trickery with it. It works until something changes. I'm sure it's going to break, but it's one way that I've managed to force clients out locally, but still pointing to the central DNS servers because they wanted to log all the DNS requests. It works. Don't know how long it'll be supported by Microsoft for, but it's one potential workaround if you can't use something like Umbrella. And I think that's it. Yep. I know it was very quick. Any questions?
Does anyone have questions for Andrew? There's a hand up. And there's another hand up over at this side here as well.
Shall I go first? Yep, I'm Aled Morris from White Fibre. You haven't mentioned IPv6 at all. I don't know anything about Microsoft, but does Office 365 use IPv6? Sounds like it'd be a good way.
IPv6 is in there, but not on all services yet. And to be honest, none of the clients I've dealt with has rolled out IPv6 internally.
Shame on them.
To be honest, I can't see a lot of very large clients doing it internally. There's nothing pushing them to get away from the 10 dot range. Yeah, but then you've got bigger problems of how do you route an IP version 6 space internally and do DIA and keep your internal routing. There was an IPv6 talk once, and I asked some of the questions, and it's a head scratcher for a lot of people. But also still at the moment, not the whole of the Microsoft stack inside of 365 is IPv6 enabled yet. I know they're working on it, but it's not quite there yet.
Okay, so the gentleman stole my question. Veronica McKillop, UK IPv6 Council and Microsoft IT. And
Uh-oh.
It's absolutely fine. I loved your talk, really. Often, because I'm on the network side, I don't deal with this stuff. But so I was going to ask about whether the clients ever thought about IPv6, because exhausting NAT sessions and connections, that makes me very happy. Because we are deploying IPv6 only internally, and we've got v6 deployed. I think this forum knows that. So I'm just going to add some information to that. Yes, there are, like, the Office 365 products are And it will be IPv6, but as you say, for example, login today isn't. There are dependencies on internal Azure networking. But hopefully, all I can say right now is we will see some changes before end of this calendar year.
Okay.
So let's see what the clients do. But
it will be very interesting to see how it starts coming through and how a client would roll out IPv6 internally and still do DIA with disparate providers for internet and not run into loads of issues. I'm not quite sure how you would do that yet, but hopefully some of the IP6 talks might actually fill in how that would work.
maybe not today, maybe some other time.
Any more questions for Andrew? And there's just one at the back, just there.
Darren Storer from Ofcom. Microsoft have a number of tuning tools that you can use to run up 365 tests out to the network. How did you find the experience using those tools to gauge which ports should be opened and latency and that sort of thing?
They help with some components of it. I think if you were wanting to tune a home connection or a small business, it would work fine. But unfortunately, on a corporate network, a lot of the things in which it uses are potentially blocked by corporate firewalls, or it's not able to cope with some of the other things that operate in corporate networks. You know, DNS being routed to the data center, but your traffic breaking out locally, for example. Potentially you're doing user level access control on your firewall and various things like that. So it works fine if you're a small business, but if you've got all the extra layers of protection and complexity a large enterprise has, they have a tendency of either not connecting or giving you spurious results. Really, if you're a large corporate client wanting to do it, you need to read the documentation from Microsoft, do some testing, and be cautious with the rollout. I think as you're rolling out, you need to do a performance of testing at multiple stages throughout the migration, because if you just run ahead with it, you're going to cause yourself some issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew.